Oh my God. There we go. There you are. Okay, hold on. More promote to panelist. Wrong way, wrong way. Oh, Jesus. Okay, there we go. Hi, Aubrey. Oh my God.
I get you. Well, and
I should never be allowed to be in charge of this. I don't know what they're thinking. My team knows better.
who put me in charge here? This is silly.
I'm gonna have to talk to Karen about this. She knows I should not be left in charge of the technology.
Yeah. Well, and it's not you because I couldn't figure it out either. I kept logging in because they're all on the same laptop. That's the thing. Like it's not like I've changed. They're all on the same laptop. And when I click on the meeting in Found Food Co., it shows people, but that's it. It didn't give me any links. So
Hi,
yeah.
Ginger. Welcome. Rhea and I were just talking about the fact that neither one of us should be allowed to be in charge of technology. So we had to start the webinar early so I could promote her to a panelist because I couldn't do it any other way. So thanks for being here early. You can sit and watch two middle-aged ladies be completely flummoxed by Zoom.
Mhm, mhm.
Five
Not that
years.
we haven't all used Zoom for how many years now. It's
Yeah,
still it's still a challenge.
yeah, exactly. Thank you. Appreciate that. So we'll give it a couple minutes since most people are not as timely as you. Where are you, Aubrey?
The library.
Okay.
My girls are getting a little at home, so I've reserved a room here so they can go down and play at the library and I can sit in a room by myself.
That's smart and sounds wonderful.
It's dreamy, I'm not gonna lie. It's pretty nice. I might stay in here for a little bit.
It's a really good idea. I never thought of reserving a room at the library. Uh,
I
I'm
did
like,
it yesterday by accident for the first time because I had my girls surprise yesterday and I had a Zoom that I needed to do. So came here and I got a room and was like, well, this is nice. So I made a plan to come on back today and do it again.
that is some A-level parenting right there.
I tell you, these libraries, they're just the best.
Yes. Welcome, folks. We're going to give it a few minutes. It is still relatively early, aka right on time, but it is summer. Everyone's on summer hours. We had our air conditioner break for the third time since we bought this house 18 months ago. So that was exciting.
That's awful.
Air conditioner techs in today. I'm pretty sure I paid enough to just replace the whole system at this point. I'm in the like sunken cost fallacy zone where I've spent so much to fix it. I don't want to put in a
I
new
don't want to buy a new one at this
unit.
point unless I can get the money that I put in to fix all of this.
Yeah, yeah. Meanwhile, I'm sure there's going to be another horrendously expensive fix, right around the corner that I'm not realizing. So,
These are those surprises that I don't like. Home ownership, those joys.
homeownership is not for the faint of heart.
No.
Hi, folks. Welcome. We're just chit-chatting while we give folks a minute to find their links and we complain about being adults. I was actually telling my therapist recently that I think that my anxiety level has been higher since we bought a house, just because I'm waiting for something like really expensive to break all the time and to prove that I've made a poor choice.
Just waiting for the universe to be like, ha ha,
Yeah,
told
yeah,
you.
exactly. You wanted a house. Thanks for coming, everybody, and listening to our little therapy session here. We'll get started in just a minute. If you want to go ahead and drop your name and where you're at in the chat. We have a relatively small group today so far. I think that's something that I've been noticing in the summer. We're getting a lot of watches after the fact, and which is actually how I do webinars, so I completely understand. But I'll give it another minute for folks to find their link, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, Megan. Nice to see you here. I hope everybody is enjoying some decent summer weather wherever you are. It finally stopped raining in Pittsburgh.
It's still raining in Iowa.
I think it's been raining everywhere this summer. It's been much rainier than usual. Hi, Randy. Nice to see you. Give it one more minute. That is sort of mood 2025.
Hmm.
Rainy. Let's see, it is. We'll get started in just a minute, folks. All right, we'll go ahead and we'll get started with some housekeeping. So thanks everybody for being here, part of our How to Start a Food Rescue series. We're actually starting in at lesson 2 this time around. If you missed the first season of this, the first 6 episodes, the sort of introduction is on our website. You can go check it out there. We do not have a webinar the month we have our food rescue conference, so we invite everybody to attend the conference instead. But for that reason, we started at lesson 2 because we only have 5 months of webinars for the rest of the year. We're going to talk about funding, and funding is super, super critical if you're starting a food rescue. If you really want to do food rescue seriously, you need resources, right? You need a staff, you need somebody to do the work, and you need some other tools of the trade. So fundraising is going to be really critical, and I'm going to go over. Well, I'll talk about that in a minute. But we do have a guest with us today, Aubrey Alvarez, who is just really an incredible person who knows so much about the space, but also has been really successful in raising money in multiple different ways, which I think is really key, as we'll talk about in a minute. So I'm going to give a quick introduction to fundraising, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty with Aubrey. Um, Drop your questions into the Q&A as we go. That'll make it easy for us to find them and answer them later. We are recording this, so this will be available afterwards to watch. I think that's super helpful. We'll be sending out the link in a couple of days usually. And then at the end of the webinar, theoretically, we'll provide a link. That depends on me being able to actually find the link, copy it, and get back to the webinar without shutting the whole thing down. So we'll see how that goes. As I said, today's lesson is funding. So Just to get you started and think about things, there's one thing that's really important to remember is that for food donation or for monetary donations to be tax deductible, you have to be a 501(c)(3). And so it's going to be really important because your financial donors, that's a big incentive for a lot of folks, not everybody, but for a lot of folks to donate, is that it's tax deductible. And foundations and grants are certainly going to want to see it going to a 501(c)(3). If you haven't filed your paperwork yet, um, and you're, kind of struggling with that process, because that can be a lot, a fiscal sponsorship can help bridge the gap. And so that's where you partner with a 501(c)(3), and they serve as the sponsor. So they'll take in the money, their 501(c)(3) counts as the tax deductible donation, but the money goes to you for programming. And this is super common in the nonprofit space. So it's not like a scam or a workaround. Like everybody knows this, and it's very common. It's just a matter of finding an organization in your city that will do that. And oftentimes your foundations will know who are some good partners for that. Another thing to think about is what's your style, and part of this is experience, but part of it also is where you're at in your journey and what your organization looks like. And so, first is traditional nonprofit fundraising. If you're coming out of the nonprofit world, if you've been in ED, if you've been in fundraising, you're very familiar with a traditional way that nonprofits sort of operate in this space of writing grant proposals and grant reports, of seeking individual donations, and that sort of like, again, that really like traditional framework. Other folks I've seen be really successful are coming from businesses and they're using more of a business model. Also, there's, the scrappy startup. Maybe you've never done this, but you're super passionate. And then probably most common would be a hybrid approach, is taking a little bit from each. But the lesson there is there's more than one pathway to success. Don't feel like you have to do it a certain way. And if you don't know how to do it, that you have to go spend 6 months learning how to do it before you even start. Go with what you know. There's more than one pathway to success. Don't let your lack of nonprofit experience stop you, for example. So, again, identifying your style. What is your experience? Where are you coming from? Who do you know? Do you know people in the nonprofit space that can help you get up to speed, or that would be interested in writing grants for you? Do you know folks at foundations? Do you have deep roots in the business community? What are your available resources? Who are your friends, family, supporters that are interested in pitching in? And really, I think probably one of the most important things is what has the shortest runway? What is going to get you those early funds that you need? What is it, Emily's list? Early money is like yeast. The more money that you have, the more money you can raise. And that's true for fundraising for nonprofits as well. So again, I've watched somebody who was trying to start something up spend 6 months trying to learn how to become a fundraiser instead of actually just jumping in. And I think that is a real mistake that can slow you down too much. What does this look like in action? So again, for traditional fundraising, we're talking about foundations, we're talking about grant writing, peer networks. There's a lot of, peer-to-peer fundraising, individual donations in that traditional fundraising mix. The business model might be looking more at corporate funding, at getting grants from corporations or even corporate foundations, which sometimes are a little bit different than a lot of the traditional nonprofit foundations. Large individual donors. If you're coming out of business, and you have friends with a high net worth, they might be your go-tos. I've seen people write $10,000 checks. That is outside of my imagination, but it is certainly possible for a number of people. And if you're coming from that world, that's a great place to look. And then also sort of investors. They're not investing for return on their profit, but they are investing for impact. And so, talking to individuals that might think of this as an investment in the community, opportunity. That scrappy startup, that low budget, individual donation, peer networks, by your bootstraps, hitting the ground running. That can be a super powerful model. And again, that often can be that early money for an organization that's trying to get their feet on the ground and be more successful in the traditional or the business model, right? And then, of course, hybrid, which would be a la carte selections of all of them. And that's probably going to be most common. But I'm saying this to kind of break down those barriers, right? To stop thinking that it has to go from point A to point B to point C, that there's one path to fundraising success. There's not, right? The right path for you is the one that you can make happen that will get you where you're going. And so, of course, the funding cycle, identify once you've kind of figure out, think about like what does your universe look like? Identify opportunities within that. Identify the foundations in your community, identify the businesses, identify your high net worth individuals, engage them. Don't ask them for money without engaging them. Share your mission, share your vision, get them excited about this opportunity. Then you go forward for the ask, and then finally thank. And we did a webinar a couple months ago about just fundraising in general, and the return donor percentage, if you thank somebody within 24 hours of making a donation, is insane, right? So thanking is super important, and a quick thanks is even better. Make sure that you're letting the donors know how much you appreciate their engagement and investment in your work. So for identifying, for looking for grants, check your local library system. Aubrey's parked in the library right now. A lot of libraries have a grant section, or somebody that specializes in nonprofit funding. I know the Carnegie Library in Pittsburgh actually has a whole department that has information on grants that you can get both locally and nationally. So check your library system. Peer-to-peer, leverage those networks. You know, it's super great if you have somebody that will write you a $10,000 check. I do not have somebody that will write me a $10,000 check at all, but I might have, 100 people that would write me $100 check. And so leverage your networks, whoever they are, whatever they look like, they're there to help and they want to help. Online giving, you can use crowdfunding sites or social media. I mean, those are really effective ways to get people to engage. Have events. Events are super great if you're not well known and you don't have a large social media presence. Getting out to table at local events or to have an event, invite people into your space if you have one, to hear about your mission. Great way to get in front of people. And of course, local businesses. Reach out to local businesses, figure out which ones might be natural allies. In terms of engaging, invite them to volunteer, have them do a rescue, ask them to attend an event, really get them to see the mission. Or if you're not already doing rescues and you're trying to get them engaged to help you get started, maybe go with them to a potential donor to look and see what the waste looks like there. Help them understand what the impact is of food waste and what the opportunity is. So really helping them to see your vision before you ask them for money. And one-on-one is another great way. So ask them to coffee to learn more. Um, know how to tell your story. And this is super important, right? Don't talk so much about what we're going to rescue food. We're going to go, we have these donors lined up. We're going to pick up food. We're going to take it here and drop it off. Even stats can fall flat, right? There's, 1 in 6 people are hungry. Okay, well, who, how, what, where does this make the impact? Talk about why. Why is this work important? You know, 1 in 6 kids or people are hungry. 50% of them are children who can't learn without adequate nutrition, right? You're telling them not about the mechanics of the work, but about the impact of the work you're doing. Learn how to tell that story. If you are struggling to come up with a compelling narrative, go watch some good storytellers and see how they craft that narrative arc from helping somebody see what the problem is and then what we can do to fix it, and then what that impact is going to be in a really emotional and tangible way. And a really good storyteller and having a really good story crafted for you to tell is your best fundraising tool. Um, Create your resources. Oh, actually, this is about resources we have. So there are, as I mentioned, we've done a bunch of webinars on fundraising. So you can go back and look on our website, and you can see we have at least four, probably more webinars that we've done on fundraising, all looking at sort of like a different aspect of it. But take a look at those resources. And then there's tons of resources on the internet for how to engage in fundraising, how to tell a good story. And actually, I'll tell you a secret, and this is really interesting, that a lot of the tools that um, have like fundraising tools like Black Box or I can't think of the name of any of them. I'm totally blanking right now.
Like Give Lively, would that count?
Sure, sure. They have information too. So there's a lot of resources out there that can help you figure out how to fundraise. So check all of those out and help build your arsenal. And then only then make the ask. And this is key. You're not asking for money, you're offering a chance for them to make a difference. You're offering an opportunity for people to have an impact in their community. Make it personal. What do they care about? Right? If it's a foundation that cares about a particular part of your region, talk about how you're going to impact them. If it's a foundation that cares about the environment or people that care about the environment, talk about the impact of food waste. Really think about your message. And when you're asking, talk about that impact in a way that's going to resonate with them. Make it urgent. There is food being thrown away today. We want to get this rolling. Every day we don't get this rolling, thousands of pounds of food is wasted that could have gone to feed people, right? Make that urgency clear. They can't donate tomorrow. They need to donate today. And then, of course, make it about impact. And then the thank you. Oh, here we go. Here, I have the stats right in here. Look at me go. I'm going to pat past me on the back for getting that in there. That if you studies show that a thank you phone call bursts boosts first year retention and increases their giving. If you call or have a board member call a donor within 24 hours of their first gift, um, their next gift is likely to be 39% higher than that on average, right? So you're not just increasing the likelihood that they're going to give more. So that's really key. Don't forget about that step. And of course, 14 months later, those donors gave 42% more than donors that didn't give the call and had a 70% retention rate. And that is key because you're going to get a lot of those like one-time donors. You want to turn those into repeat donors. So that's really incredible. Don't forget about that step. It's easy to celebrate the win and then move on to the um, next hurdle and forget to take this step. So those are just like a quick overview. Again, we're going to be sending out the recording so you can take a look at these and dig in deeper if you want. But I'm so happy that you're here, Aubrey, because it's one thing to talk about, it's another thing to do about. So I want to talk to you about your real experience with doing this, with running a startup, with getting money, with getting
Mhm.
people engaged in a vision that is, new and different to them. Let's talk about that. I'm going to stop my screen sharing so people can see you.
Yay.
Yeah. So,
Well,
yeah, go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
was going to say I could share, I know at the beginning. So I feel like I came into the work in a little different manner, which also impacted how I raised the funds. When I initially took the role that became this job, I took a job as a local food coordinator, and it was housed within another nonprofit. It was housed within a pantry network. And my job was just to go around and ask people throughout the food system what's working, what's not. And food rescue kept coming up as an opportunity because I was talking to a lot of the groups that needed the food and talking to a lot of the businesses that had the food. So that's really where, that food rescue started to rise up as an idea. And then the nonprofit we were in, my preference would have been to stay nested. I don't think it's not like starting nonprofits is not for the faint of heart, but I had to do it. So again, we were nested at one point, then we became a fiscal sponsor. We had another organization fiscally sponsor us while we were in the process. And then 2 years later, my organization became a separate nonprofit. So over the 10 years that I was there, we've done it. And then my org was a fiscal sponsor for other ones too. So it kind of comes full circle.
That's awesome. So, one of the things that I just love about you in general and respect about you is that you're a like get it done kind of person, right? Like it doesn't matter what the right way is, you want to get it done. So, and I think that's really important when it comes to starting a nonprofit, just so important. So, from a fundraising standpoint, where should people start? Like, what's your advice on that?
I think where I started was kind of like you said, who do you know already? Where are your networks? Who knows you and who do they know? So, really, I think the key to my success in the beginning was I just showed up at a lot of places. I was there, I was asking questions and getting engaged and trying to find, who are the people that also are on the same page as this. So, a big part of it was we locally working with our community foundation, going in to speak with them, making sure they knew who I was, they knew what we did, because a lot of it was kind of like, Jen, my network isn't writing $10,000 checks. I know that these people are out there, they're not my friends. So it was really important for me to get advocates that were inside those networks and spaces to help not only get fundraising, but these were also the ones that were talking to decision makers. And so, that's really where the funding initially was always it was very heavily grant funded in the beginning because as a staff of 1.5 people with no infrastructure, I'd never written grants. I actually in my master's program, I didn't take the grant writing class because I thought it sounded awful. And I was like, oh, you know what? It is a little bit sometimes, but really it doesn't have to be awful because I've compared it to kind of the same thing of why I was successful in college. I have ADHD. I have a hard time like remembering and like things connected my brain. So it always helped me to go and talk to the professor. It helps to go talk to the
Yeah.
funder and ask them, okay, so I see you have this grant. I've read it, it seems like this project could work. Does that sound right to you? They want to help you if possible, or not waste their time and your time either. So having those conversations were really helpful because I didn't have time to spend writing 15 different proposals for $1,000. Like that, no. I had to figure out where could we potentially find, ten, $15,000 at a time. And so that was kind of where it helped me just in directing my path because there's a lot of folks that want to be helpful, but again, we got a grant from before. There's like, oh, it's a really easy application. It was at least 10 hours of work for $3,000. That's not a good
Yeah.
return on investment. So, those are some of the things that I had to learn over time. And really, kind of also, like Jen said, the biggest part was once you get a funder, don't lose them. Keep that relationship. So that was probably the biggest piece is we had an initial funder, and what they were able to also do was help connect us to other funders. So
Yeah.
again, this is the part where a lot of funding and like food rescue, it's all about relationships. It's about having authentic relationships, really making those connections, because I think that's really where over time trust builds and you can go from, oh, they volunteered and did some stuff and then they, donated $25 and now they've set up a monthly donation and they're doing this, all the time. And now they've asked and their, family has a foundation and they've given us money to buy a truck. So, that's the kind of path. I think where I struggled the most was asking. It's hard to just ask
It is.
and say it and put a number, but I have found that if you ask and you put a number on it, the more specific you can be, the better.
Yeah.
That
Yes.
was helpful. The one of the best, so I always like to like have a goal. Say like we're trying to raise. I remember one of the my first food rescue transportation program, we were wanting to pay drivers and I had budgeted we had to raise $10,000. So I was like, okay, $10,000. I was calling around trying to get places and called one place who said, yeah, we'd love to be a part of this. And I said, great, once I raise the rest of the money, I'll give you a call back. And they said, oh, how much do you need? Said $2,500. I said, oh, yeah, okay, that's fine. You got it. And again, I'm like, dang it. I shouldn't have, like, I didn't even think to, like,
Best for five.
I know, like, I should have asked for more. So again, that's always been my kind of approach is to this is a beginning of a relationship. Like, I'm not trying to take advantage. I think I had a hard time with fundraising in the beginning too, because it felt like as a staff of one, I was asking people to pay me. And
Yeah.
that felt very weird. So, getting around, I think Jen was exactly right. Like the impact on the work and the stories was really where, and helping people connect to those. One of the other, I don't know in your area, but one of the ways I think that was helpful for me in getting in front of people to speak was we have a local United Way that does company campaigns. And so I said yes every time they wanted someone to go and speak in front of an employee group. Because again, I'm not going to get in front of these people other ways. Like Rotaries, I went and spoke
Oh,
at a
yeah.
lot of
Amazing.
places all
Oh,
the time just to get maybe a couple people out of there. And maybe it was someone's like, oh, that's amazing. And they want to volunteer. Maybe it's like, oh, you know what? I know someone who works there. Maybe I could get them to help. So that's really how I think and we built momentum over time was just kind of bringing more people in. Because in the beginning, we didn't have, our donors were $10, $25 donors. And one of the pieces I think that helped us the most was getting to the point where making it easy to give regularly. We used Give Lively. That's not a plug. That's just what I know. And they allow it so you can set up monthly
yes.
donations, recurring donations. And
And
that
recurring
was
donation.
very
Oh my God,
helpful.
yes.
Yes. Giving the option to keep, and it's small. So maybe, 10, $25 a month. And so in setting those Give Livelies up, they also allow it so you can say, $25 a month pays for this. This, be able to give specific examples and found that that really helped the message kind of sink in
Yep.
for folks.
Yep.
And that worked a little bit better.
Yeah, I want to call out a couple of things that you said that were really smart. So first of all is go talk to the foundations, right? Because they will actually give you help. Go to their office, give them a call, set up a Zoom. They will tell you what they need and they will tell you whether it's worth your time to apply, right?
Mhm.
And so, I mean, a lot of times I know my sort of tendency is not to do that, right? It's just to write it and send it in. No, save yourself the time and go in, and you'll get the help you need to know that you should or shouldn't apply there and what a successful grant might look like. The second thing is check and see how much they tend to give, right? Look at the size of their gifts up to X amount, right? No more than Y amount. And then ask for that. Like ask for a lot of money. If they give $100,000 grants, don't ask for 10, right? Ask for 100 because you might get it. It always to me feels like, oh, do you want to give me that $2,500? But if they give out $5,000 grants, then ask them for the five.
Mhm.
Ask them for what they give. It doesn't feel weird to them to have you ask for that much money.
Mhm.
Um, have a project budget that shows how you're going to use that money. Uh, that's really key. If you're asking for, especially a foundation, if you're asking for $100,000, tell them why that's important.
Mhm. And
Um,
show them. That's one of the like being able to bring them in and say, here's why, here's all the things that it covers. And I think a big thing for me and where I see some nonprofits is that whole, well, is that going to programming or operations? I just never got into that conversation. The only way any of this work gets done is if all of us are here. This is not, you can only pay for, I only want to pay for this. Okay, well, then we're not for you.
Yeah.
You could say, like, I really want this to focus on food rescue efforts because we also did local food. But other than that, like, again, if you're a small shop, having a bunch of very opinionated on what you can and can't do and tracking all of that will
So
just
hard.
cause you more problems in the long run. And I don't know that federal grants are going to be a huge issue here for a bit, but those are the kinds of things that you have to look and make sure what's the reporting requirement. So, those are things I didn't always look at ahead of time and learn my lesson the hard way. And just making sure that you are paying attention to those because sometimes the work comes in and if you don't you write a grant. I think my always challenge was you write a grant, then you don't hear anything for 6 months to a year, and it comes back and you're like, oh, what did I say I was going to do? Or they're reimbursement grants and you have to do the work and then get reimbursed. So, those are some of the things I think having private foundations and nonprofit orgs, but also I looked a lot at our public city funding and county funding. They were, again, a way to find in-kind resources. So that was another big part of my kind of fundraising. We used money to buy the infrastructure. And one of the ways we did that, we did get eventually have a refrigerated truck and ended up with two refrigerated trucks. And that allowed us to diversify our funding streams and have earned revenue. Because while we were using the truck to pick up food recovery and deliver it, it also allowed us to do pickup and delivery for local restaurants and local other like wholesale food businesses. So again, look at what else is already, if we already had this truck, we already had it driving around, we were able to get paid to do these things that we were already doing. So, those are the kinds of things where trying to connect and not turning it into something new. We're going to start something new. Ideally, no. Ideally, like fund what you wanted to do and bring in, like, this is how we were able to. One of my, outside of cash, we had free office space. I still have free office space. Like, those are some of those things that were invaluable. Like, if I would have raised the money, that's thousands of dollars every month. And so, some of those things and make sure you're tracking it because again, then you can show here's the
Yes.
value of what everything. So not just cash dollars, in-kind dollars are where we also show the impact because again, we want people to think more expansively about how they can get involved and what their resources are.
Right. And that's actually also really important too, because a lot of foundations, and not just foundations, also like corporations and other funders, don't want to feel like you've only got one path to fiscal stability, right? They want to think they're part of the crowd, right? They're joining others to help you in your success. And so showing that you have office space donated is another organization that is contributing to your success. And that's where sometimes also those small dollar donor individual donations, um, it may not be a huge part of your total revenue. It probably won't be, but especially early on, it shows that you've got buy-in and that you're not just relying on foundations. And they do love to see that variability there.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's as common everywhere, but because we were United Way, I don't know if they have core employee campaigns. And
Yeah.
so they made it very easy if you can't to sign up to be able to get designated funds. So there were some of those things where I just needed to make sure my organization was on the list as a choice for where things could go. And so that was also the place where trying to show up. Where are people talking about food access? Where are they talking about health? Where are they talking about sustainability and trying to be in that space? So then you can also meet who else is here? Who else cares about this? Like who else? I met lots of potential funders and partners in those rooms. And that's kind of the other way I fundraised is collaborate.
Yeah.
Like share, if write other people into your grants, get written into their grants. That's also how we really move things along because one, funders love collaboration. I think the key there is being very clear in the budget with everybody else, like what the money is for, how it's going to work, because I've seen that go left when you get money. But it also just makes it's a win for everybody. It's kind of like writing letters of support. What are you trying to do? Because we can only do what we can do. And if we're
Right.
able to bring in those partnerships, like when we collaborated with our public health department or, collaborated with some other community-based groups, they bring their network. And that's great. Speaking at the Iowa Public Health Conference has been great. There have been times where I'm meeting people that I wouldn't have met before, and it's opening up opportunities that I didn't think about.
So you mentioned the $10,000 or $3,000 grant that took 10 hours of work, right? But then you also mentioned going to the Rotary clubs and which we've done a ton of speaking, lions, elks, rotaries, moose. Oh my, it's a
Yeah,
whole,
any animal.
any animal, it's a whole, beavers, whatever. It's a whole thing, right? So I think that's a really important calculus is how much time am I putting into this and what is the return going to be? And it's interesting because the moose, elks, lions, whatever, don't necessarily translate to $100,000, but they might translate to a $10,000 donation from the club and some individual donors and some volunteers. And so that's where, again, like that calculus is how much time am I putting into this and what is my return on investment? Is there more than just a financial return on this? That might make it even more worthwhile to go to some of those events.
Yeah. Because a lot of these groups too, and having obviously a lot of things is having volunteer opportunities. They like to get engaged. So, sometimes depending on for us, gleaning was a great opportunity. So this time of year when all these gardens and farms are starting to have a lot of extra produce and things like that, that was an activity event, volunteer event that we were also able to make an ask there. And, for people who aren't harvesting produce every day. When they go glean, they're like, this is a blast. People around here pay a bunch of money to go pay to pick apples to then
They
pay for the
literally
apples.
pay you to go do like farm work.
Yeah, they want to do this. So I was like, why are we in your way? So again, and that was where I think it's the building those connections and relationships that then open doors to, oh, well, my spouse works here. I think they might be interested in this and following up. That's the
Yeah.
big part. And making sure, keeping them included in your success, like what she said, that was the part that the calls when we did actually like have a board member call, a lot of times it was leaving a message, but they felt so it was great for the board member too. I'm not gonna, it's fun, calling people and being like, thank you so much for that gift. They're shocked to hear from you. And they think it's so kind. And it's just like a little bright spot in your day. And that's if you're having a tough day, call and thank some people and then you'll feel better.
Yeah, that is very, very true. And I always say, so it's interesting as we're talking about this, it's kind of clicking in my brain that the to me, the fun part about all of this, right, is in some ways it's as much of a like logistics puzzle as food recovery itself.
Mhm.
Right. What are all the pieces? What are the various options? What do we have time for? What can we do that will get us not just one thing that we need, but click, 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 three things that we need? Normally I say avoid mission creep, like don't do something that isn't part of your mission. But if gleaning, which is kind of adjacent to your mission, is also going to give you an opportunity for group volunteer activities, which is going to let you bring in a lot more money, that kind of makes sense. And so it's thinking about like what are all those puzzle pieces that you can pull together to make a complete funding pie. And I think like older, more rooted nonprofits in general, let's say Food Recovery Works, but in general, nonprofit, their fundraising professionals like automatically know that, right? They know it's this puzzle. But sometimes when you're starting out, you can feel like you're maybe you're chasing too many balls or you're going too many directions. And I think it's really important to keep in mind that, there's a lot of puzzle pieces out there that can fit together to help your organization grow. It's like finding the ones that work for you and that you can pull off and putting those together.
Mhm. Yeah, the being specific about what you need has been, and I think, there were times where a lot of it, because I don't know, but for me, a lot of times you're, on the surface, things are great, but underneath, you're going really fast and trying to figure everything out. When I slowed down and just told people, hey, here's where we're at. When we started our food rescue transportation program, I said I raised $10,000 to cover 2 months. That's all I raised, $2,000 or $10,000 to cover 2 months. And then what I didn't anticipate was it was a huge success and everyone wanted to keep it going. And because of that, and I was honest and very vocal about like, I love this too. This is costing us this much. It happened to be, again, the universe provided because at that time there was a large bank that had gotten in trouble for swindling people and they had to make donations to
Woohoo!
places. And so they wanted programs that were up and running and needed support. So again, that was me being in the right place, having the right conversation because we were able to pitch that project. They funded that program for 3 years. That turned into $100,000 that came out of nowhere. So,
Yeah.
I think those kinds of, I didn't go in thinking that. It's just being open to and having people know. Well, you're passionate and you show up and you care about the work. That's, people would invite me to events and everyone I talk to, this is what I talk about. How do you
Yeah.
want to get involved? What do you want to do? I'm at the dentist. Hey, have you ever done food rescue? So, you know,
I still do that.
well, I still do
That's
too.
what I
I
want.
know I talk about community fridges all the time. Would you like one? So again, and I think that's why even though I'm not still in that role, people still see me and they're like, "Oh, that's who I can talk to and ask about that." And that's what we want is people to see us as resources and
Yes.
partners and connectors. I always told folks, they're like, "Oh, well, isn't this competition with the food pantries?" No. Like if you want to buy food, do that. We're not buying food. We're paying to make sure all the food that was already produced gets to places where it could be consumed, including those food pantries. But again, we're not the same thing. That's cool. If that's your passion, do it.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Awesome.
it's not an either or, it's a both and. Like we can
Yeah.
all do some of this stuff together. And I think that approach of not turning other people into the enemy also was helpful. I'm always surprised at how groups think that like bad mouthing another group is going to help you. It makes you look bad. So, like, just being able to really highlight what you're doing, what you're excited about, how people can get involved, and being specific, like Jen said, you can go look at people's 990s and see how much their gifts were. And that's been helpful for me because if you're making an ask and they're like, well, how much do you ask for? And again, I don't know. And they're like, ask for what you need. And I'm like, no, really? Like, how much? Is this like $1,000, $10,000, $100,000?
Yeah.
I got budgets for all of them. Which
Yeah.
one do you want? And so when I couldn't get an answer going back to the 90s and looking at me like, okay, it looks like most of their gifts were $25,000. I'm going to probably ask for 40 just to, give us a little room. So, those are some of those working smarter and not harder and trying to just I did all of my grant applications in documents so I could cut and paste, move them into other documents and, use what you have. You don't have to recreate it every time. I know Chat GPT is probably burning things down. It's helping my brain, ADHD brain a lot because it helps me reformat to the questions so that it can still be a little bit adjusted, but look at what you already have, who you
Yeah.
already know, and you probably got a lot.
Yeah. And I want to go back to you said, what do you want? 1,000, 5,000, 10,000. That's also really important is create your templates for various asks so that the $5,000 donor feels like they're doing something meaningful, right? Feels like that's not just a drop in an endless bucket because you want those $5,000 donations. You really want the $100,000 grant, but you're only going to get one of those, right? And you're going to get a whole bunch of the other ones, which are going to fill in. And so being able to tell that $5,000 donor and $1,000 donor why that gift is meaningful and how it helps create impact is important. So I think just having ready to go so you don't have to think about it, that sort of scalable ask and scalable sort of impact demonstration will cut down your time as you are reaching out to more and more places.
Mhm. And having those, like Jen said earlier, the data and the numbers, I came from the somewhat business side. So being able to show a return on investment was always important for me to say, like, here's the dollars. But again, someone like me, you can say a bunch of numbers and it doesn't mean anything to me. But when you tell me the story of like, here's what actually happened, I'm full of stories to share about the work. And that's really where, being able to make it connect. If they really care about kids in schools, like talk about the stuff that we're doing, oh, we have fridges at schools. Schools have a ton of food waste. That kids are hungry and they can't learn. Like, again, tie it to make that connection. And I think that's really where my neurodivergent brain is helpful, is making those kinds of connections. But that's really where, again, engaging with them to find out what interests you, what do you want to do, but also recognizing you just got to ask at a certain
Yeah.
point. I was one that was like, let's talk forever and then never make the ask. So
No, you're right. You definitely do have to make the ask. So engage first, but get to the ask is really key. What would you say? And I'm going to open it for questions in a second here, but what would you say are is like the biggest pitfall that you want to warn people about in like 2 minutes or less? What would you say don't do?
don't get disappointed by a no. You're going to get a lot of them. That's okay. Move on quickly because you have to get okay with being told no or not right now and not taking it and like shame spiraling. Okay, move on. Find some, like, go to the next one. Have a lot of things out so that they all will land at a different time. But those are don't get disappointed by a no. You're going to get a lot. It'll build
Yeah.
character.
And this year's no might be next year's yes. I mean, they might come around
Yes.
later. It is
It
building
did,
that.
that helped us a lot of times is when, and if we gotta know, the ability to reach back out to that funder and say, hey, could you tell me more about why we weren't funded?
That's key.
That is, and sometimes they can, and sometimes they can't. A lot of times just asking and being like, well, should we do this again? Because there are grants. Again, is it worth your time? Where we've spent a bunch of time, but they get 350 applications they fund for. This
Right.
is not a good use of our time and energy. Those are the kinds of things where I think it's really easy sometimes to get, you see the number, oh, $150,000. Look to the details. Oh, it's national and they're only giving out three.
Right.
Okay. Like, what are our odds here? So, that's where instead of doing that, banding together with partners and writing a big $1 million grant gets us that same amount of money, but we have a better chance than out of three. Our odds are better.
Yeah, and I will tell you right now, that sort of collaboration is very hot in funding. If you can work with another organization to apply for joint funding, very, very hot within grant circles. So,
And we
um,
like to partner with our university to do evaluation and do like
yes,
that kind of stuff. So again, like, who would they believe? Not me. Okay, I got someone.
yeah, yeah. So, okay. Do folks have questions about fundraising, startup fundraising, any of the things that we've talked about? We'd love to hear them. Drop them in the Q&A. If not, Aubrey and I will continue to just chit chat about funding. We have lots of, I think, probably combined experience between us. I'm not going to say how many years
But
experience we have, but quite a bit. And I will say, before we do that, that next month, actually I want to drop two resources in the chat. We've got our How to Start a Food Rescue Guide, which is always great for download. And then I also just give a shout out to Randy, who is on the webinar today, but Food Rescue Dude has a lot of information on his website. So if you're starting a food recovery organization, strongly recommend you check out his stuff. And then I mentioned our webinars, our next webinar next month. We're actually doing end of year fundraising. We'll have a external expert come in and talk to us. He's helped food rescue organizations. In fact, one of them double their end of year giving. So that'll be really great. And then we're also talking about food donors, working with food donors next month. And I know that is a really hot topic for everybody in the food rescue space. It certainly is something that we're all trying to do is make sure we get more food donors. And then finally, the last thing I'll say before we go back to questions and other things is that there is as I mentioned, we do a conference in October. It is coming up. We have a really good lineup this year. We're just about ready to announce it. I'm super excited about it, but I would love for everybody to check that out and attend. We'll have topics ranging from fundraising to food donors to food justice, lots of really great stuff to working with volunteers. And that is happening in October. That being said, if you've got questions, again, we'd love to answer them. Yeah, we will share the presentation out as well with the recording when it gets sent out in a couple of days.
Well, and it made me think of the your like events. I will say events weren't something that we did a ton of because it was just me. I didn't want to do them all the time and they're exhausting. And that's where I was inspired seeing that 412 Food Rescue did their bread to beer
Yes.
project. And I was like, that sounds fun. Well, I'm going to see if I can get someone here to do the same thing.
Yep.
So again, if someone else somewhere else is doing something, I would just ask them like, "Oh, how did you do that? What did you learn? How could we do something like that here?" It took me many years to get a brewer to do it, but they did, and they actually sold it at the Iowa State Fair. It was a
Yeah.
beer made out of hot dog buns.
Yep.
And so it was just to test it out. I will say we didn't make any money from it, not a bit, but it got the idea out there and it showed proof of concept.
Yep.
And while we didn't make any money, I did take us, we got a lot of media attention and we went to the fair and set up our own thing and just, again, thinking of other ways. My goal was always to have a group of breweries that do that and they could set up, just regular sources,
Yep.
but that's a pipe, that's my dream still.
We're doing a year-long collaboration in 2026. I have 14 breweries signed up,
It's
one
so
every month. Which I'm super excited about. And we've had some that didn't make any money, but now we say, please add a donation for our organization on top of the price. And that is a requirement of doing it, is that there has to be a monetary benefit because we put a lot of time and effort into sourcing the product and getting it there and the logistics of it and the media and all of that organizing for it to just be for fundraising. That's great once or twice, but in general, you want it to have a return. And I think that's a good lesson is that if you try something and it doesn't have a return on your investment, it's just fundraising, maybe it's still worth it, maybe not. Depends on what your needs are. Friends are pretty easy to come by, turns out.
especially if you have food. I feel like that's the other part. You got food, we can, that was where a lot of that stuff did kind of shake out too, where we tried things. And that's again, if you get a no, or if you try things and they don't work, okay. Like be able to, I think there were a lot of times where after the words, it is helpful to be like, okay, what did go wrong? Like, what could we have done differently? What would I do differently? And just keep trying things out, and you'll find kind of your groove of what works. I will say, making it easy for people to do consistent donations was a real game changer. Making it easy for people to donate to us through social media. I didn't realize how much of a change that was. You do need to have 501(c)(3), but when we lost that connection for a year, that made it really hard for people to do fundraisers for us
Yeah.
because there's a lot of social media fundraisers and people want to fundraise for you. So again, I didn't realize how important that was until we didn't have it and then how much work it took to get it back in. So once you get it,
Yeah.
don't
Hold it.
lose it.
Randy made a really good point in the chat, and he said there may be funders who initially say yes, and then the next time, no. And so you want to reach out and find out why. You really want to understand, is it that they only do like first year funding? Have they shifted focus? You might actually find, and this has happened where a funder says, well, actually, we're really focused on social determinants of health now. Well, guess what? 50%
Same.
of our donations are produce, right? And you learn how to better make that case. And so really always ask for feedback on the nose. I think feedback on the nose is almost as helpful as a yes. Not quite, but
100%.
they're good to get. Yeah, get that feedback.
Yeah.
Well, are there any questions? I'm going to do a final call out for questions. Everybody, it seems to be just soaking it in, and maybe it's the summer heat. I
That's
certainly
the,
love to just take a nap or sit by the pool with a cocktail myself right now instead of
Mhm.
working, but here we are.
Here we are talking about funding instead.
Yeah. Well, I hope that this has been helpful for folks, and and I would love to, hear your feedback. And actually, when we do, when we send out the link to the recording, we have a survey included. So I would encourage folks to let us know, give us any feedback, or let us know what topics you want to hear about that we're not talking about. So I definitely would be interested to know, or what guests you'd like us to have on. Give us that feedback. So, with that, thank you so much, Aubrey. I really appreciate your time on this. You are super insightful as always. And remember, folks, she was a one-person show. So when we talked about doing all of those things, that was something she was doing in addition to food rescue logistics. So it is possible to do it all.
It is. And
Yeah.
it's helpful when you can get others. And that's where being able to get to the point to be able to share that with others was a
Yes.
huge success. That's what
Yeah.
you're trying to get to. So just keep plugging away. You'll get there. You'll find the friends.
Yeah, and that is the goal. Is sometimes you have to do it all yourself in the beginning, but getting to the point where you can have help and do it better and bigger and whatnot.
Mhm.
And it's possible. So,
Well, and I will say don't discount because I think I was a little bit of a round peg in a square hole in my community. And so know that if it's not always local, some of the groups I thought would be my biggest advocates weren't. Talk to the other, that's where I was glad that I did reach out to other food rescue groups and, like Jen and meeting others just to have someone else to be like, how are you doing this? It's a difficult, it can be a challenging space. So I think, find a community of people that you can go to when you're stuck and be like, how do you do this? Because that helped me many times just have a group of people like this
absolutely.
that I could go to and be like, okay, I don't know what to do here. That saved me a ton of time, energy, and worry. And sometimes it was just, oh yeah, that's you're not alone. And that's all I needed.
Yep, absolutely. So, well, again, thank you so much, Aubrey. Thank you, everybody, for
Thanks for
being.
having me.
Enjoy the rest of your Thursday, everybody, and have a great weekend.
See ya.
Bye.